Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku death was just the beginning. If you guys enjoy this movie, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Herreraman from AO3. So let's start the video. Japan, one of the most popular and most technologically developed countries on the planet Earth. It's well known for its culture, history, landscapes, nature, and the list goes on. There are millions of tourists visiting this country each year. Since the age of quirks began, the number of these tourists grew even larger, most of them setting their feet into this country to witness these heroes in the flesh. And they cannot be blamed for this action. There are countless amounts of heroes in Japan who are famous not only in their home country but worldwide as well. For example, there is 𝐀𝐦, the #1 hero of Japan, who is also known as the symbol of peace. There is also 𝗵𝗏, the #2 hero of Japan, having almost just as many fans as 𝐀𝐻, or 𝐵𝑒st, the #3 hero and the 𝗵𝗏 hero, who is well known for his excellent style of fashion aside from his heroic deeds. But in the case of the people of Japan, this is quite ordinary. Of course, everyone on the street usually becomes excited when there's a battle between a villain and a hero, especially when the hero is a very popular one. But aside from this, they didn't give anything much about the heroes, mainly due to the fact that every normal citizen was too occupied with their own activities, such as doing the jobs they had and studying for school. A certain green-haired young adult was similar to the citizens of this country, having a relatively normal life, just like everyone else. Little did he know, on this fateful day, his life would change forever. It was a clear, sunny, winter morning in the country of Japan. The streets were covered in thick layers of snow and the sun was already in the sky, shining its brilliant orange, life-giving light for everyone not only in the country but in the city of Musutofu as well. Recognizing the start of the day, most of the people woke up from their slumber and began their morning routines, wishing to get ready for work as fast and efficiently as they were able to, while the rest of the citizens were still in their beds, sleeping due to not waking up to the rays the largest celestial object in the solar system emitted, or because they just didn't want to get out of their beds. Our protagonist was amongst these people. At the outskirts of the city of Musutofu, in an apartment complex, inside his room, around 7 o'clock, the 20-year-old Izuku Midoriya was lying in his bed, sleeping peacefully and comfortably, unbothered by the sounds of the awaking city. However, unfortunately for him, this state didn't remain for too long, as he calmly ventured deeper and deeper into the realm of dreams in his slumber. His alarm clock went off, releasing its annoying, cheeping noise that everyone hated to hear. Hearing the sound of his alarm clock, Izuku awoke from his sleep, pressed the alarm in order to stop it from making its annoying noise, rose up in his bed, and stretched his arms, rubbing his eyes and opening them after he was done with this act. Then, he proceeded to look around his room, which was an ordinary one, checking if there was anyone else inside with him. All the while the memories of the previous day and the dream he had in his sleep flooded his mind. He had a really strange dream. It looked like he was in a place of pure darkness, being nothing there aside from himself. Then, a large explosion occurred, filling the whole place with shining light. After this, he was in some kind of shining city surrounded by golden gates and countless amounts of clouds, being foundable high up in the sky. Then, as in the last image in his dream, he was talking to a very tall woman, tall compared to the other beings who were around her, with cedar-brown skin, white freckles, and silver-colored, hip-length hair. Although this dream was very out of the ordinary, he was not surprised by this. He was quite used to these kinds of dreams. He has been experiencing these types of dreams since he reached the age of 4, as he remembered back to the dream he had in his previous slumber. His usual morning headache that he always acquired after a dream like this struck him, causing our protagonist to extend his right towards the small bottle that contained the painkillers that could make his pain vanish, grabbing the bottle with his left hand and opening it with his right hand, pouring a pill into his right hand and consuming it, closing the small bottle with his right hand and putting it back next to his alarm clock. Then, Izuku got out of his bed, rose to his full height of 6 feet, and walked up to the entrance of his room, laying his right on the door's handle and pushing it down, opening it and allowing him to exit his room. Once he stepped out of his room, he headed in the direction of the living room, which also served as the kitchen of the apartment, wanting to make himself breakfast. Once reaching the living room kitchen, Izuku stopped at the doorway and moved his head forward, setting his vision on the room. For the past 6 years, when he did this action, the sight he usually witnessed was his mother standing in the kitchen part of the room and making their breakfast, which was usually katsudon, his favorite food, always greeting him and observing him with the kindest, sweetest smile this world could ever give. A smile that was the only light source in Izuku's entire life, and was the only thing that brought happiness and hope into the many dark hours of his life. But now, this smile was just a faded memory. and his mother was not there, with the only thing occupying the room being silence and loneliness. As he reminded himself of these precious memories, our protagonist stepped inside the room, walked into the kitchen area, and opened one of the small closets, taking a medium-sized bowl out of it and positioning it on the table. Removing a spoon from the drawer, the silverwares were foundable, and a bottle of milk from the fridge, placing them on the table near the bowl as well. As for the last of his breakfast, Izuku laid his hands on a box of cereal that was positioned in a different closet from the bowls, positioning the box of cereal next to the bowl, descending down on one of the chairs, and pouring the cereal into the bowl first, then the milk, putting the bottle down on the table, grabbing his spoon and placing it into his cereal, beginning to consume his morning dish. Once he finished his meal, he stood from his seat and positioned everything into its original location, with the two exceptions being the spoon and the bowl he used to eat his breakfast into the wash basin, desiring to clean them and put them back inside their own respective places, just like he did with the milk and the box of cereal. So, in order to do this, he grabbed the bowl and the spoon with his hands and placed them into the wash basin, pouring water on them and cleaning them, drying them with a tiny towel, and positioning them back inside the places he got them out of. After he accomplished this act, he left the living room, kitchen, and headed in the direction of the bathroom, wishing to take a shower in order to wake himself up fully and clean his teeth. After reaching the door of the bathroom, he unlocked the door and entered it, closing the door behind his back and starting to take his pajamas off, taking a quick morning shower after he accomplished this act. After ending his shower, drying himself with a towel, wrapping the said towel around his waist, brushing his teeth, and getting out of the bathroom, our protagonist went back inside his room and walked up to his closet, touching its doors with his hands and unlocking it, allowing him to take a look at inside the furniture. Then, he reached into the wardrobe and chose the clothes he planned to wear that day, which were simple underwear, a green-colored pullover, a white shirt that had the title shirt on it with Japanese kanjis, and blue jeans, placing the clothes on his bed and beginning to undress his body. Once taking off his pajamas and getting his clothes on his body, he made his bed and put his pajamas on it, preparing it for the time he would go to bed. After this, at first, Izuku grabbed his wallet with his right hand and put it into his right pocket. Then he touched the All Might-themed flask, which he bought for himself due to the fact he was a big All Might fan despite his age. With his left hand and the handle of the yellow-colored large backpack he kept next to his desk, with his right hand putting both his backpack and flask on his bed, unzipping the backpack, letting him put anything he desired into it. Then, Izuku walked back to his closet and laid his hands on the uniform he had to wear in his work, closing the doors of the closet and placing his uniform inside his backpack, closing it by zipping it. Then, he touched the handle of the backpack with his right hand and his canteen with his left hand and exited his room with them, heading back into the living room, kitchen of the apartment. After entering the living room, kitchen of his home once again, our protagonist put his backpack on one of the chairs and walked up to the wash basin with his bottle, unlocking it and filling its inside with clean, refreshing water, cleaning small droplets of water off of the side of the flask with a small towel. Once he completed this act, he put his bottle on the table and opened the door of his fridge, taking all the food he needed for the sandwiches he planned to make himself as the food he could eat during his breaks, which he didn't have many. After he finished creating the delicious sandwiches, he wrapped them in foil, protecting them from falling apart and storing them properly. Then, he laid his hands on the sandwiches and placed them next to his bottle, grabbing the zipper of his backpack with his right hand and opening the backpack, allowing him to put his flask and sandwiches inside it. Once he put everything he needed into his backpack and zipped it, Izuku grabbed the backpack by its handle and began his way towards the front door of the apartment, wishing to get his red-colored shoes on his feet. At the moment he reached the entrance of the apartment, our protagonist put his backpack down on the floor and started to take his shoes on, tying them perfectly. Then, he went to the hanger that was positioned at the right of the door, which was on the left side for Izuku, and took his green-colored coat and red, yellow, and blue striped scarf off of it, putting his coat on himself at first and wrapping the scarf around his neck, protecting his body from the possibly cold weather with this type of attire. After this task was done, he laid his hands on his backpack, put it on his back, reached inside his right coat pocket for the key to the apartment he usually stored there, put the key into the keyhole, and turned it, unlocking the door with this activity. Then, he grabbed the door handle and moved it down, opening the door and offering him a chance to leave the apartment he and his mother had for the past 6 years. Once stepping out of his home, closing the door, and locking it with the key, Izuku proceeded to go down the stairs in order to get to his car, which was owned by his mother before him. As he got to the floor that below the floor his apartment was foundable, he focused his vision upon a sight he was quite used to. in front of his eyes. At the entrance of the apartment that was below his, a middle-aged woman who had long, brown hair and a small, 6-year-old girl who obtained the same colored hair as her mother, although it was much shorter than her mother's hair, were located, with the former locking the front door of the apartment and latter witnessing her mother in this act, both of them acquiring winter outfit, and the young girl even obtaining her school uniform under her coat and a backpack that had the hero 𝗫𝗏 on it on her back, thus indicating that she was her favorite hero. Hearing the approaching footsteps of our protagonist, the little girl shifted her attention from her mother, moved her body, and turned around, allowing her to set her eyes upon him, resulting in her becoming very excited by seeing him. Mr. Midoriya. The little girl beamed in delight as he ran up to Izuku, happy to see her upper neighbor, causing him to set his eyes upon the small girl with a tiny grin on his face, with the mother of the young girl looking at Izuku as well, although with not the same happiness her daughter acquired. "Hello, Kokoro," Izuku greeted, referring to the little girl as Kokoro, crouching down to her. "Hi, how are you? How's the school going?" he wondered, still occupying the small but honest smile on his face. "Do you behave correctly?" "Yes, I do, Mr. Midoriya," Kokoro replied with pure joy in her voice. "I always behave well in school. The teachers never scold me," she stated, not losing one bit of her cheerful attitude. "And your grades?" our protagonist inquired, then continued, "Do you learn properly?" "Yes, Mr. Midoriya, I study a lot," the young girl assured, "and I don't have any bad grades," she stated, acquiring the same gleeful smile on her face from before. "That's good to hear," Izuku remarked a bit smilingly, delighted to see that the young neighbor girl was not in a bad mood and didn't have bad results in school. "Mom, won't you say hi to Mr. Midoriya?" Kokoro queried her mother with pure innocence, focusing her attention on her female parent. "Good morning, Mrs. Nakamura," Izuku greeted as he witnessed Kokoro's mother, whom he referred to as Mrs. Nakamura, saying hi to her with his tiny grin. "Good morning, Mr. Midoriya," Mrs. Nakamura said as she walked behind her child, greeting our protagonist by his name, and forming a small smile on her face, giving off the vibe that she was delighted to see our protagonist as well. However, the grin she acquired was not as honest as the one her daughter had. Instead, it was just a fake grin, perfect for her to hide her true emotions, which were not other than afraidness and disgust, with her thinking that she could cover these feelings with her fake smile. However, she couldn't have been further away from the truth, because at the moment she morphed her fake grin on her face, our protagonist immediately recognized that it was not a true smile, him being capable of doing this due to knowing the feelings she and the majority of people had towards him. "How are you? Is everything all right?" Izuku asked, genuinely curious for her and her family's well-being. "Why yes, everything is all right," the mother of Kokoro stuttered, looking at our protagonist with her fake grin. "How is Mr. Nakamura? Is he still sick?" our protagonist questioned with worry, fearing for the health of Mrs. Nakamura's husband. "And no, he's fine and now. Thank you for asking," Mrs. Nakamura said, faking her gratitude for Izuku asking for her husband's well-being, moving next to her daughter. "And now, I'm sorry for ending this quickly, but I need to get Kokoro to school," she announced, then moved her head and set her eyes upon her daughter, extending her right hand in her child's direction, offering her a chance to take her hand. "Come, sweetie. Let's not keep up with Mr. Midoriya any longer." "Okay, bye, Mr. Midoriya," she told to Izuku smilingly, saying goodbye to our protagonist and waving at him with her right, then taking her mother's hand, following her down the stairs to their vehicle. All the while Izuku observed them in this activity, hoping that the adorable young girl would have a great day at school. After the conversation between our protagonist and his neighbors who lived below him, Izuku continued his journey toward his car, going down the stairs carefully, not wishing to slip and fall down the stairs. After reaching the ground, he moved his legs and approached his vehicle, wiping the snow that was on the windshield of the car with his hands, wishing to see the road when he would start his car and get on the road with it. Then, he opened the door of the car that allowed him to have access to the steering wheel and descended down on the driver's seat, putting his backpack on the passenger seat and closing the door of the vehicle, putting the car's key into its hole and turning, activating the engine and starting the car, allowing our young adult protagonist to begin his journey to the location of the workplace he has been working for the past 6 years. Due to his workplace being positioned in the center of the city, it usually took Izuku around 10 minutes to get to his place of work, but thanks to the snowy weather and the morning traffic, this time length was extended to 15 minutes, causing him to become more and more nervous as time went on, fearing that he might arrive to his workplace. Once he reached the position of the place he worked, he parked his car at the nearest parking lot, which was a bit away from his workplace, and deactivated his vehicle, laying his right hand on his backpack and exiting the car, putting his backpack on his back. Then, he began to rush in the direction of his place of work, wishing to get to it as fast as he could. 1 or 2 minutes passed, and his eyes noticed the building he needed to go to, setting his eyes upon it and witnessing it from afar. His workplace, where he has been working since he was 14 years old, was a small, modern, normal coffee shop, being foundable at the corner of the street and having large windows on the walls to offer the people passing by it a good look at the design and interior of the shop. Shortly after seeing the coffee shop, Izuku attempted to speed up, wanting to get to it as soon as he could. Not even 1 minute flew, and our protagonist reached the coffee shop, stopping at its windows and witnessing the well-decorated insides of the building, checking if there was already someone else in there. And when he did this, he quickly got his answer. Inside the coffee shop, which had many tables and chairs, allowing all the customers who might enter the shop to comfortably drink their coffee, 2 people were foundable, one of them being a black, short-haired woman around his early 30s, and the other being a man with blonde hair near to the end of his 20s. Both of them wearing their uniforms, which consisted of a white shirt, a black apron, and black jeans, wearing the shoes they put on their feet when they left their own respective homes. The woman was cleaning one of the few wooden tables, with the tables having 4 wooden chairs around them, with a wet towelette, which was in her right hand, and a bottle of disinfecting spray, which was in her other hand. All the while the man was behind the cash desk and was doing something on his phone, taking the role of the person the customers could go to and could pay for the drinks they had. After seeing the coffee shop was not empty, Izuku grabbed the handle of the entrance with his right hand and moved it down, unlocking it and letting him step inside. When he opened the door, the tiny bell that was hanging above it moved, releasing a tinkling sound and resulting in the 2 employees stopping what activity they were performing and setting their visions on our protagonist, who, in response, moved his jaw muscles and opened his mouth, beginning to speak. "Hi, Yokoyama. Hi, Wade," Izuku told his male coworkers as he shut the door behind his back, greeting them with a small smile on his face. "Hi, Midoriya," Yokoyama greeted, saying hi to his youngest coworker with a blunt expression that had traces of disgust as well. Meanwhile, Wade did not even open her mouth to greet him, just looking at him with hidden rage and going back cleaning the table she was at. "How are you this morning?" our protagonist wondered, curious about his coworker's current state. "Is everything all right with you?" You could say that." The male, blonde-haired worker responded with boredom, shrugging with his shoulders. "Is Mr. Takahashi here?" Izuku questioned, wanting to know if his boss had already arrived or not. "Midoriya," someone shouted behind the back of our protagonist with pure frustration and anger, causing Izuku to create fear and anxiety and turned his body around to see the person's voice, recognizing their voice in an instant. And when he performed this action, he saw his boss, Hiroto Takahashi, who was a man around his early 50s, having 4 arms, black skin, and an antenna on his head, obtaining these physical attributes of a bug thanks to the mutation quirk he had, and was wearing a black jacket with a white shirt under it, a red-colored, well-tied tie, black jeans, and black shoes, showing off his position with his clothing. At the moment our protagonist set his eyes on his employer, he moved his body downwards and performed a bow immediately, showing his respect to his boss. "Mr. Takahashi," Izuku said, greeting his boss with fear inside him. "You were late with 2 fucking minutes." Again, Mr. Takahashi declared with pure hatred, disgusted by the mere sight and presence of his youngest employee. "I am sorry, sir," our protagonist apologized, performing a bow again to show his regret for being 2 minutes late from his job. "I promise it will never happen again." "I hope so," the boss of our protagonist answered. All the while Yokoyama and Wade observed him in this action, not even thinking of intervening due to assuming that Izuku deserved this treatment. "A villain like you doesn't deserve a second chance," he remarked, not losing from his enraged behavior and his disgust for Izuku one bit, with the 2 employees agreeing on their boss's statement. Izuku was used to this type of behavior that most of the people treated him with, and, truth be told, he didn't really care about it. He thought that he deserved it for the kind of crimes he committed. The crimes that his father, the well-known mafia boss, Hisashi Midoriya, forced him to do, such as killing, robbing, and torturing, telling him that it was the last thing he could do as a useless, quirkless brat and threatening him with taking his life if he didn't obey to him. And yes, he was made to perform these atrocious acts. But he still blamed himself for this, thinking that he could put an end to this if he was strong enough. Of course, his life became easier and less painful after his father was and died in prison during an outbreak attempt, but the ghosts of his past never left his side. As our protagonist remembered these not very pleasant memories, he was brought back to the present by Mr. Takahashi, who proceeded to go with his disrespectful, cruel speech. "Now, get into your fucking uniform and start working, you lazy shit," Mr. Takahashi ordered, having the same hatred in his voice from before. "Why yes, sir," Izuku responded with afraidness, understanding his boss's command and bowing to him once again. Then, Mr. Takahashi turned around and walked back to the door he used to enter the room, grabbed its handle, pushed it downwards, and unlocked the door, allowing him to step out of the room and begin his journey back to his office, leaving the 3 of his employees there. Once his boss stormed out of the area, Izuku raised his upper body from the bow he made and began his way in the direction of the dressing room, wishing to get into his uniform, just like his boss commanded him to do. After getting to the front door of the dressing room, our protagonist extended his right hand and touched the handle of the door with it, pushing it downwards and unlocking it with this activity, allowing him to enter the room. Then, he stepped inside the room, which had many lockers and a bench in the middle, and removed his yellow-colored backpack from his back, placed it on the bench, and started to take his clothes off. After he undressed fully, leaving his underwear only on his muscular body, which he acquired from the brutal, almost inhumane kung fu and jiu-jitsu training his father put him through since he was young and was not fond of showing to other people due to the scars he obtained on his back, torso, and upper arms, and grabbed the zipper of his yellow-colored backpack with his right hand, pulling it and opening it. Then, he reached into his backpack with his hands and pulled the clothes that were the parts of his uniform, starting to place them on his body one after another. Once he finished dressing up into his uniform, which was the same style of attire his coworkers possessed, he put his right hand on the zipper of the backpack, zipped it, walked up to the locker that was his, unlocked it, and positioned his backpack inside it, shutting the door of the locker, planning to come back for his backpack when he would have a break and would eat his sandwiches. Then, he headed towards the exit of the dressing room that served as its entrance as well, laying his right hand on the handle and moving it down, opening it and allowing him to enter the main area of the coffee shop he was working at. Once he exited the dressing room and closed the door behind his back, our protagonist moved his legs and positioned himself next to his male coworker, taking a similar role just as him with a few more additions. Shortly after he walked to Yokoyama, Wade ended up cleaning the table and placed her towelette and disinfecting spray on the table. She headed to the entrance of the small coffee shop and touched the small sign with her left hand, turning it to its opposite side and announcing to the people on the streets of Musutafu that they were finally open, thus signaling for Izuku that today's work has truly begun. During this work, Izuku did all kinds of things, taking orders from customers, being the cashier if Yokoyama had a break, creating the drinks for the customers and serving them to them, cleaning the tables if Wade was on a break, bringing the coffee shipments inside, and the list goes on. It was an exhausting job, and it didn't really pay much, but he didn't care about it. It was enough for him. In fact, he was even grateful for having this job. Of course, everyone was cruel to him at his workplace, but he couldn't do anything about it for one simple reason: it was the only place where he could work. When his father got arrested and he and his mother moved out of the family mansion they had as their original home and moved to the apartment when he was 14, he decided to have a job to support his mother financially, which his mother was against due to not wanting her son to begin working at that young age. But she couldn't stop him. So, Izuku went to workplace after workplace, mostly restaurants and coffee shops, having countless interviews with the owners of these places. Unfortunately for him, he was turned down at every location, with the reasons being his young age and his father's reputation. It seemed like he was not able to help his mother in any way until he found this coffee shop and Mr. Takahashi let his work there, although due to his young age, his father's reputation, and the crimes his father forced him to commit, Mr. Takahashi only allowed him to work in weekends, only letting him work in 8-hour-long shifts and work overtime, which he did every day, thus making him work 10 hours a day after he finished high school. And since then, he has been working at that coffee shop for 6 years, enduring cruelness and bad treatment day after day. After his shift was done, Izuku grabbed his bottle, went inside the dressing room, walked up to his locker, got his yellow-colored backpack out of it, opened it, and began to take his uniform off, placing both it and his canteen into his backpack and dressing himself up into the attire he chose to wear on that morning. Then, he zipped his backpack, put his jacket on his body, positioned his backpack on his back, and left the dressing room, heading towards the front door of the shop and stepping through it, locking it behind his back with the key his boss gave him due to him being always the last one who left the building. By the time he exited the coffee shop and closed the door, the sun was already setting down, radiating its gorgeous reddish, orangish light to the citizens of the city, most of being on their way back to their own respective homes due to finishing their own shifts, just like in the case our protagonist. Then, Izuku moved his legs and attempted to head back to his vehicle, opening its door, getting into it, sitting down on the driver's seat, putting his backpack on the passenger seat, positioning the car's key into the keyhole, and turning it, starting the engine of the vehicle and allowing him to access the road of Musutafu. He had been driving carefully through the streets of the city he lived in since he was born for several minutes until he arrived at the beginning of a specific street. Recognizing the street, he turned the steering wheel of his car and directed his vehicle into the street, going down on it until he arrived at a particular house. Once reaching the said house, He parked his car next to the nearby sidewalk and stopped his vehicle, leaving his backpack on the passenger seat and getting out of the vehicle, observing the house with an honest smile on his face. The house was a large one that was built out of bricks and had a light gray color scheme, acquiring numerous windows on both of its floors, allowing a certain family that inhabited it to look outside and set their eyes on the street. The house was surrounded by a row of dark brown colored brick fences, with small trees being placed down in front of the fence as decoration. And the only location that was not occupied by the fence was the gate in the sidewalk that led to the front door of the house. After he looked at the house for a second, Izuku attempted to approach it, passing through the gates and walking on the sidewalk until he arrived at the front door of the house. Then, he raised his right hand and touched the dark brown colored wooden door with it, performing 3 knocks on it, announcing his presence to the residents of the building and not wishing to enter it without giving a signal. Shortly after his knocks, the sound of footsteps getting closer and closer was hearable, assuring Izuku of the fact that the inhabitants of the building heard his knocks. Then suddenly, the handle of the front door was pushed downwards from the inside and the door was opened, allowing our protagonist to set his eyes upon the one who unlocked the door. In the door, a woman with red eyes and blonde, spiky hair was standing, being shorter than our protagonist and being at the end of her 30s, but still looking young and fabulous. Her attire consisted of a white shirt with a light purple-colored pullover above it, wearing a black skirt around her waist, and brown slippers on her feet, completing her home attire. She was no ordinary human in our protagonist's life. She was Mitsuki Bakugo, Izuku's beloved aunt, and of 3 people in his entire life aside from his mother who didn't treat him like trash after his dark past and actions were revealed to the public. After Mitsuki saw who exactly the person who knocked on the front door of her family's house, her eyes widened in surprise, all the while Izuku opened his mouth and began to speak in the process. "Hi, Auntie," Izuku said with a smile, saying hi to his one and only aunt, whose surprise quickly transformed into joyfulness once she recognized him. "Izuku," Mitsuki greeted as she presented Izuku with a big, loving hug. "Happy to see her nephew. I haven't seen you for 2 weeks. How are you?" she wondered as she released her beloved nephew from her hug, wishing to know if her nephew was well or not. "I'm fine, Auntie," Izuku assured. "You look tired," the spiky-haired middle-aged woman remarked, forming a sweet smile on her face. "Come on, get inside. I don't want my precious nephew to catch a cold," she said, then turned around and began to walk back towards the living of the house. "Do you want a coffee? I'm sure a coffee would fix you up in no time," Mitsuki wondered, having a nice personality that she only showed when didn't have to scold her son for his bad behavior. "Yes, a coffee would be good," Izuku responded, following his aunt inside the house, closing the front door behind his back, taking his scarf, coat, and shoes off of his body, putting the former 2 on the hanger that was at the left side of the door and positioning the latter at the right side of the door. "Masaru," the aunt of our protagonist exclaimed as she entered the living room of her home, wishing to earn her husband's attention, with Izuku following her steps in the process. "Yes, honey," Masaru shouted from another room, probably from the kitchen, curious about the thing his wife wanted from him. "Izuku's here," the blonde-haired middle-aged woman announced, causing her husband to exit the kitchen and enter the living room, placing his nephew's attention and revealing his attire for him. Masaru was a middle-aged man with short, brown, spiky hair, having the same style as his wife's hair, and acquired a short mustache under his nose and obtained rectangular glasses on his face. His clothing at that moment consisted of a green shirt, light brown jeans, and black socks, with his brown slippers being the clothing that was the last part of his attire. Once he saw his one and only nephew standing in front of his eyes, the brown-haired middle-aged man adopted a smile on his face, delighted to see his nephew. "Hey, kid," Masaru welcomed, saying hello to his nephew. "Hello, uncle," Izuku greeted with a smile on his face, happy to see the second person who didn't hate him. "Honey, could you please make a cup of coffee for us?" Mitsuki requested kindly from her husband, placing her attention on him a bit. "It's right on the way," Masaru announced, then turned his body around and attempted to walk back inside their kitchen, beginning the creation of the coffee that his wife asked him to do. Once the head of the Bakugo family left the room, Mitsuki moved her head and shifted her attention once again, focusing it on her beloved nephew. "Come on, sweetie, take a seat," the spiky-haired middle-aged woman advised as both she and our protagonist approached the 2 brown-colored sofas that were in the room, with our protagonist descending down on one of the sofas and his aunt sitting down on the other, facing her nephew. With this action, "Katsuki," the spiky-haired middle-aged woman shouted in anger, losing her smile for a short amount of time and desiring to get her son's attention. "What is it, old hag?" Bakugo exclaimed up from the 2nd floor, possibly from his room, replying back to his mother's shout, not even surprising Izuku by calling his mother a hag. "Izuku's here," Mitsuki declared with the same enraged tone, then went on with her speech. "So get your ass out here and say hi to him," she ordered, not taking aback her nephew with the style of her speaking one bit. After this order was spoken, the next thing the auditory organs of our protagonist picked up was a loud groan that was filled with frustration and tiredness, signaling indifference toward our protagonist's presence. Then, Izuku could hear the cracking sound of the chair as the only child of his aunt and uncle stood up from it, probably sitting on it at his desk because he was studying at that moment, and left his room and began to come down the stairs, which action Izuku thought 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 was doing from the sounds of his approaching steps getting closer and closer with each second. Shortly after this, 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 reached the floor where his mother, father, and our protagonist were foundable, showing off his appearance to them, resulting in Izuku setting his eyes upon him. The 𝐻𝐸 quirk user had blonde, spiky hair and red eyes, just like his mother. The list of clothes he had on his body was made out of a black shirt with a skull emblem in the middle, black jeans, and brown slippers. Once seeing the spiky-haired teenager who was 5 years younger than him, Izuku moved his jaw muscles and unlocked his mouth, attempting to speak once again. "Hi, 𝐾𝐻𝐸," our protagonist greeted, calling him by the nickname he gave him years ago. "Sup," 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 said bluntly, having an expression that emitted a mixture of grumpiness and indifference on his face, seemingly showing Izuku that he did not give a shit about his presence. But Izuku knew that this was not true. In his own, rather unique way, 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 cared about the ones who were the closest to him, including our protagonist, thus making him the third individual in the whole world who didn't have hatred towards him. To that day, Izuku remembered the times when he taught him a little bit of kung fu and taught him the basics of playing the drums, bringing them closer to one another. And to top it off, our protagonist even helped him in using his quirk more efficiently by analyzing it and taking notes about it, thus resulting in the formation of a stronger bond between the two boys. As Izuku reminded himself of these memories, the father of the 𝐻𝐸 quirk user stepped out of the kitchen and entered the living room, holding 2 cups in his hand, each filled with coffee, and positioning himself next to the sofa, being at the side where his nephew was foundable and focusing his attention on him. "Here you go, kid," Masaru said, extending his right hand towards his nephew, offering him a chance to take the cup of coffee he made for him out of his hand. "Thank you, uncle," Izuku remercied as he grabbed the cup of coffee with his right hand and took it out of his uncle's hand, with him giving the other cup of coffee to his wife, who touched it and took it out of his other hand, then sat next to his nephew on the sofa. "So, how's your job, sweetie?" the blonde-haired, middle-aged woman questioned as her son placed himself next to her, then continued, "Is your boss still an asshole?" she queried, moving her cup to her mouth and taking a sip from her caffeinated drink. "Yeah, he kinda is," Izuku stated as Masaru sat down on the furniture next to our protagonist, with Izuku already knowing what the reaction of his aunt would be to this statement. "I swear, if he doesn't stop treating you like shit, I will report him and sue the shit out of him in his shop," Mitsuki declared with pure anger in her voice, becoming enraged every time she heard that her nephew was mistreated for the actions he was brutally forced to perform. "You don't need to do that, auntie," our protagonist protested. "He isn't worth the trouble," he stated, not wishing to get his aunt and her family into his own troubles. "And what do you plan for the rest of the day?" Masaru wondered from his nephew. "Well, to be honest, not too much," our protagonist noted. "After this, I think I will pay a visit to mom, then go home, train a bit, and just collapse on the couch and rest," he listed as he took a sip from his coffee, wishing to keep his body in good physical shape, making all 3 members of the 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 family acquire worry inside their bodies when our protagonist mentioned his mother, even 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔, although he didn't any sign of it at all. "Izuku," Mitsuki started, worry in her voice, "you know if you want to talk about it, we're eager to listen to you. You know we are here for you." "I know, auntie," Izuku replied, then went on, "but it's fine, really," he assured. "Are you sure?" the blonde, spiky-haired, middle-aged woman inquired with worry. "You know you can tell us anything you want," she declared, reminding her nephew of this very fact. "Yes, I'm sure," Izuku reassured, not wishing for his aunt and the rest of the 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 to worry for him. Throughout his entire life, besides his mother, the members of the 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 family were the nicest and the kindest to him, lending him a hand in everything they could. After the father of our protagonist was arrested and the actions of Izuku and his mother forced to do reach the surface, the 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 family actively supported them in the court, standing up for them and not wanting them to get into jail for the rest of their lives. And even after the case of our protagonist and his mother was dismissed and everyone stood against them and mistreated them, they stood by their side and aided them as much as they could, even offering them to live with them under the same roof, which idea 𝐾𝐻 and Izuku refused to go along with almost in an instant, not wanting to be a nuisance for them. And with this, the conversation between Izuku and the 3 members of the 𝐵𝑃𝑃𝑔 family went on, talking about various topics and spending quality time with each other in delight. During their conversation, our protagonist even chatted with the 𝐻𝐸 quirk user a bit, asking him about you and his preparation for it due to the entrance exam being just a few months away. Of course, hearing his inquiry, Bakugo adopted the self-centered, prideful part of his personality he was known for a bit, telling him that he would pass the entrance exam with flying colors and would crush his enemies, causing his mother to become angry at this style of speaking, resulting in a small argument between mother and son, with Masaru trying to separate them and end the argumentum. All the while Izuku just witnessed the whole scene with a small smile on his face, knowing that despite the many years that passed, the Bakugo stayed the same as they were. After around 2 hours, our protagonist decided that it was time for him to go back to his home, standing up from the sofa and telling the 3 other people in the house about the action he was planning to take, which saddened his aunt and uncle but understood his choice of activity in the end. So, after he told this to them, he told them goodbye and headed to the entrance of the building, putting his shoes on his feet and positioning his coat on his body. Then, moved to the front door, grabbed its handle, turned his head, said goodbye to the members of the Bakugo family, and pushed the handle down, opening the door and allowing him to enter the streets of the city he lived in. By the time Izuku stepped out of the house of the Bakugo family, the sun was nowhere and its place was taken by the moon, with the rest of the sky being occupied by the countless amount of stars, and the only light source on the streets of Musutafu being the street light that was findable near the sidewalks. Once closing the entrance of the home of the Bakugo family behind his back, Izuku attempted to approach his vehicle, opening its door and descending down on the driver's seat, putting the car's key into its keyhole, and turning it, starting the engine of the car and allowing our protagonist to get to the roads of the city and go back to his apartment. At least, that was the activity that most of the people would have done. But not in Izuku's case. Before he could head home, there was one more place he had to go. So, after starting his car, our protagonist entered the road and proceeded to drive in the direction of that location, driving carefully on the road. He didn't have to drive for long. After around 3 and 4 minutes, he got to the place wished to go to, pulling up to the sidewalk that allowed the citizens of Musutafu to get to the location on foot, stopping his vehicle there and exiting it. Then, Izuku attempted to walk to its entrance, which he reached within a minute, stopping its open metal gates and looking up at the title that showed the name of the place, which was the following: Musutafu Local Cemetery. After observing the title for a few seconds, our protagonist passed through its gates and entered the location, leaving the gate open. Due to being nighttime, Izuku used the flashlight mode on his phone to navigate through the numerous gravestones, not planning on stopping his journey until he arrived at his destination. 1 or 2 minutes flew by, and our protagonist reached his destination, making him lose the smile and happy personality he had at his aunt's and uncle's place, focusing his full attention on the location he arrived at. In front of his eyes, a gravestone made out of marble was foundable, obtaining a little bit of snow on its surface and a single name on it written in Japanese kanji. A name that for everyone else was just a normal one. But for Izuku, it was way different. This was the name of the person who was the light in his entire life. The person who always stood by his side, no matter what happened to him or what he did. It was the name of his mother, 𝑘𝐦 Midoriya. After seeing that he was at the right place, our protagonist cleaned the small amount of snow off the gravestone, turned the flashlight mode on his phone off, put his phone into his right pocket, and kneeled down to the gravestone, opening his mouth and beginning to speak in the process. "Hi, Mom," Izuku said in a saddened tone, observing the gravestone as he did this. "How are you today?" he inquired, knowing that it sounded a bit weird that he asked this from the dead. But he didn't care a single bit about it. "Don't worry, I'm fine. Just the usual stuff," our protagonist assured. Then continued, "Mr. Takahashi is still awful to me, but Auntie and Uncle are always nice to me, always try to help me," he stated as he formed a tiny smile on his face, thinking back to the kindness the Bakugo family provided him with. "But I don't know how long I can live without 𝐸, Izuku confessed as his smile vanished from his face, with tears of sadness beginning to slowly form in the corner of his eyes in the process. "I miss you, Mom," he declared with grief, letting his tears leave the corner of his eyes and roll down on his cheeks. It has been just a few months since Izuku lost her because of that car accident. She survived the crash and was brought to the hospital, but her injuries were so severe that doctors couldn't save her. His mother was everything for him. She was the person he could always find shelter in. She was the person who taught him how to sing and how to play the drums, even helping him in his studies when he needed to. Every time his father abused him or forced him to do something he didn't want to do, his mother always comforted him and supported him, even standing up for him against her awful husband numerous times, which usually resulted in 𝐴𝐾𝐻 getting hurt by Hisashi and being forced by him to perform the bad things her son was supposed to do. And when this happened, Izuku always blamed himself for his mother getting hurt, thinking that if he hadn't been a useless, quirkless loser, his father wouldn't have been so cruel to them. But his mother assured him that she didn't care about what she had to do to protect him and always told him he would love him until the end of time with all her heart, not caring about whether he had a quirk or not. Even after his father was arrested, his mother got divorced from him, and they moved out of their original home. His mother continued to help him, teaching him how to do the chores, how to cook all kinds of foods for himself, how to clean properly, preparing him for adult life. And for all of this, Izuku was grateful. He thought nothing could go wrong and nothing could interfere with his and his mother's relatively peaceful life. But unfortunately, he was very wrong. Ever since his loving mother passed away, he felt like he was not whole at all. He felt like when his mother died, the only person aside from Mitsuki, Masaru, and Bakugo who was nice to him, a part of his being perished with her as well, making him think that he would never be the same person he was when his female parent was alive. After around 2 or 3 minutes of silent crying, Izuku swept his droplets away with his hands and unlocked his mouth, continuing his speech. Anyway, I will come back tomorrow. Goodbye, Mom, Izuku announced, then stood up, turned around, and began to walk in the direction of the gates of the cemetery, planning to pay a visit to his mother's grave the following day, being unaware of the fact he would never see her gravestone ever again. Once getting out of the cemetery and entering his car, he started his car and began his journey back to his apartment, reaching it in 10 minutes. After parking his car, putting his yellow-colored backpack on his back, locking the doors of his vehicle, walking up the stairs, stepping inside his home, and placing his shoes, scarf, and coat in their respective places, our protagonist did a little bit of training, such as a larger amount of push-ups and other physical activity, took a quick shower, put his pajamas on his body, made a simple dinner for himself, watched a little bit of TV after he finished his meal, then went to bed, wishing to recharge himself for the next day with a good sleep, not knowing that in his mortal life, that would be the last time he fell asleep. It was around 1 a.m. when suddenly, the whole apartment began to shake, waking up our protagonist from the realm of dreams in an instant. Once shaking off sleepiness and regaining his full consciousness, Izuku got out of his bed, dressed up into regular clothes, and ran out of his room as fast as he could, rushing to the front door and getting out of his home, wanting to check what exactly was going on. After exiting his apartment, the ground shook once again, this time with even greater force, and the auditory organs of our protagonist picked up a loud roar, causing him to turn his head in panic towards the direction the roar came from. And when he performed this act, he saw Mount Lady, a heroine who started her job just a couple of months ago, fighting a huge villain who was just a tiny bit shorter than her, with her being aided by Kamui Woods in her fight, not being far away from the apartment complex he lived in. As Izuku observed the fight in absolute shock, never expecting a fight between a villain and heroes to take place during the middle of the night, someone let out a shout, gaining the attention of everyone in the area. "Everyone, get out of here," someone shouted down from the ground, resulting in Izuku getting out of his shocked state and moving his head in the direction of the one who shouted, allowing him to see the hero labeled as Death Arms being on the ground, speaking to the escaping residents as he observed them with his eyes. "We'll get you to safety," Death Arms declared, waving towards himself with his right hand, guiding the fleeing, panicking citizens in the direction of safety. Izuku didn't need to be told twice. He began to jolt down the stairs at his top speed while avoiding falling down the stairs, passing by the 3 members of the Nakamura family in the process, who were performing the same action as them. Once going down the stairs and reaching the ground, he started to follow the fleeing crowd as fast as he could, not wishing to get hurt or worse. But as he did this, the villain punched Mount Lady with all of his strength, causing her to crash into the apartment complex, sending debris into the air and resulting in him stopping in his tracks, turning around, and witnessing the event in horror. But as he performed this act, his eyes noticed another event. An event, unbeknownst to him at that moment, would change his life forever. He would have never expected. As Izuku observed the destruction of the apartment complex and the Nakamura family ran past him, Kokoro accidentally fell in her hurry, becoming the primary target for a large amount of debris that was falling toward her. Seeing the event that was about to unfold, the body of our protagonist moved on its own, running in the direction of the little girl. Then, with the help of his legs, Izuku leaped towards Kokoro and extended both of his hands towards her, pushing her out of the way. And when our protagonist, suddenly, in his perspective, the world slowed down around him, letting him take a look at the debris that was mere centimeters away from hitting his body. Then, with great speed, the debris struck him, burrowing him under it instead of the young, little girl he had saved. Kokoro couldn't even process what just happened, this being due to her mother rushing back for her and taking her hand, getting her away from the rubble, not wishing her to get hurt. All the while Kokoro just looked at the rubble in shock, not even having the ability to process the event that had just happened between her and Izuku. And as this action went down, through a small hole, Izuku just witnessed the whole scene with ease, relieved by the fact that Kokoro was safe and didn't get hurt at all. That was it. At that moment, he knew that it was his time to go. And even if he wanted to get out of the rubble, because of the serious injuries he obtained from the debris falling on him, he had an injury on his head and his arms, and one of his legs was broken, preventing him from moving in the first place. not even mentioning the fact it was really painful. But Izuku didn't care about it. The only thing he cared about was that he saved Kokoro's life, with this action being the first good deed he did in his entire life. As he continued to lie under the rubble and blood continued to pour down on his head, Izuku's vision started to become blurry and everything around him began to turn black, with his eyelids becoming heavier in the process as well. Feeling this, Izuku looked through the small hole and observed the night sky one last time, then closed his eyes for once and for all, with his last thought being that would never open them ever again. However, he was unaware of the fact that the next time he opened his eyes, he would find himself in a completely different place, or rather, a different realm. Mere moments after Izuku closed his eyes, he opened them once again, expecting to see himself at the same spot he closed his eyes before, being stuck under the rubble, with broken limbs and bones. But instead, he was falling. He was falling right down from the sky, approaching the ground faster and faster as the seconds passed by. And before he could process what was going on, he hit the ground, landing in an alleyway, into a big, metal dumpster full of trash, easing on his falling a bit. Shortly after landing inside the dumpster, our protagonist crawled out of it, touching the hard, dirty ground and hurting himself a little bit with this action. Then, with a little bit of dizziness inside him, our protagonist lifted his head and pushed himself up, kneeling on the ground while keeping his hands on it as well, allowing him to look at the puddle that was in front of him. And when he set his eyes upon the puddle, the only thing he saw in it was the reflection of his face, which didn't change from the face he was born with. After witnessing reflection, Izuku slowly stood up to his feet, coming back to his senses as he performed this act. But as he did this, he began to touch his body with his hands in panic, checking if he still acquired his injuries or not. And to his shock, he didn't have any. No broken arms, no broken leg, no bleeding head. His body was healthy and didn't have any damage inflicted on it. Heck, even his clothes were not damaged at all, only having stains from him landing inside the dumpster, like the debris falling on him would have never happened. As he witnessed his body in absolute shock, Izuku heard the noise of cars and other types of vehicles coming from the exit of the alleyway, making him move his legs and approach the part of the alleyway where he could get out of it. And when he did this and looked around the place where he was, he knew one thing for certain: he was not on Earth anymore. Instead of near the apartment complex he lived in, our protagonist found himself on the streets of a city, with most of the buildings obtaining a red color scheme and having themes that were mainly used and visited by adults on Earth, such as nightclubs, stripper clubs, casinos, and bars. In the place of the night sky that had the dictate light of millions of stars on it, a red-colored sky was foundable with few blackish, reddish clouds, with the rest of the sky being occupied by an enormous pentagram floating above the city. As Izuku observed the street of the city with a mixture of awe and shock, he failed to notice the approaching of a being whose way he was standing, causing the person to extend his hands towards our protagonist and move him out of the way with force. "Get out of the way, asshole!" someone shouted as he pushed Izuku out of the way, resulting in him falling to the ground and turning his head in surprise, desiring to see the one who pushed him. But when he did this, his surprise was replaced with pure fright and fear, all of this being due to one single reason: the person didn't look human at all. Instead, he had a rather demonic appearance, having horns on the top of his head, 3 eyes, and 4 arms. Seeing the demonic-looking individual, Izuku began to move backwards, wanting to get away from the being as far and fast as he was capable of, rising to his feet and unintentionally getting on the road in the process. As our protagonist stepped onto the road, a car was approaching his location, with its driver honking at him, gaining his attention with this act. Hearing the sound of the honk, Izuku turned his head in the direction of the sound, letting him observe the vehicle that was rapidly approaching his location and making him jump out of the way of the car and landing on his butt, narrowly avoiding being hit by the vehicle. In complete fright, Izuku stood up from the concrete road and rushed to the sidewalk nearest to him, continuing to jolt down on the street in a mixture of pure confusion and fear, passing by numerous inhabitants, each of them not looking human at all and having their own unique appearances. What was this place? How did he get there? Why did everyone look so strange? Where was he running? Izuku didn't know. Too many things happened to him at once. All he did know was that he needed to get away from the street as fast as he could, wanting to be at a place where he could be alone and could even begin to process what had just happened to him. He found the location he wished for sooner than he thought. Several minutes of running later, our protagonist arrived at the open gates of a nearby park, causing him to run through it and enter the park, hoping to escape the loud noises of the city he ended up in. To his surprise, the trees and the bushes in the park were just like the ones on Earth, acquiring green leaves on their branches. As he witnessed the trees in the park with his eyes, Izuku began to lower his running speed slowly, even stopping his running and starting to walk around the park. While he performed this act, with the help of his vision, he noticed a wooden bench nearby, making him approach it and sit down on it once he reached it. Then, he opened his hands and buried his face into his palms, attempting to process all the things that just happened, which seemed impossible at that moment. But as he performed this action, he failed to hear the sound of approaching footsteps, getting nearer and nearer to his location with each passing second. Then, the sound of footsteps stopped and silence struck the area, meaning that the person had reached the place where our protagonist was foundable. Once getting to his location, the individual opened his mouth and began to speak, revealing his presence to Izuku. "Are you okay, young man?" Someone wondered with a voice that sounded like someone was speaking through an old-fashioned radio, resulting in Izuku raising his head from his palms and setting his eyes upon the man who was talking to him. The man had a slim, dapper body with beige-colored skin, having a broad smile on his face, showing off his mouth full of sharp, yellow-colored teeth to our protagonist. He was taller than Izuku, standing at approximately 7 feet. The individual obtained a pinkish-red colored, angled bob cut with black tips at the ends and 2 large, black-tipped tufts of hair extending from the top of his head, evoking the ears of a deer, with Izuku not being able to decide if it were his real ears or not. The man had a pair of antlers between those tufts, acquiring a black color. He had eyes with dark red sclere, bright red irises, and thin black pupils. The attire of the being consisted of a red pinstripe coat with dark red lapels piped with white, which was ragged along the bottom hem, a bright red dress shirt that obtained a black cross on the chest area underneath his coat, and long black dress pants with matching bright red cuffs. He was also wearing a dark red-colored oval-shaped monocle, rimmed with black, over his right eye. He also acquired a black knotted bow tie with a bright red center, black-colored gloves with red fingertips on his dark gray hand, and black pointed toe boots on his feet that had red deer hoof prints emblazoned on the soles, covering his red hoof toes with them. As the last part of his attire, he was holding a red, old-fashioned microphone in his right hand, acting as his cane. As our protagonist observed the man with his eyes, being taken aback a bit by his look, he opened his mouth and proceeded to speak, with only one word being able to escape his mouth at that moment. "What?" Izuku questioned with pure confusion, taking back a bit from how the man looked. I said, "Are you okay, young man?" The man wondered, repeating his question with a wide smile on his face. "Why, yes, I'm okay," our protagonist stuttered, not being sure about the statement he made at all. "Are you certain about that, young man?" the individual questioned, "because you seem quite stressed out to me," he stated, pointing out this fact to our protagonist. "And no, I'm fine, really," Izuku replied, then decided to ask the question that people say when they meet a person they have never met. "But who are you?" "Oh, I'm sorry, where are my manners?" the man declared with joyfulness, never losing from the size of his wide grin. "I'm Alastor," the man announced, referring to himself as Alastor, tossing his mic into his left hand and extending his short-clawed right hand towards Izuku, offering him a handshake. "Now, who can I honor in you, young man?" Izuku Midoriya," our protagonist said, introducing himself to Alastor as he took his hand with his right hand and shook it. "Well, Mr. Midoriya, it's an honor to meet you." "Truly it is," Alastor stated, releasing his grip on our protagonist's hand. "But I have a question since I noticed you on this very bench. What is a human like you doing here in this realm?" he wondered, referring to the fact that Izuku kept his human appearance and didn't have a sinner look. "Just like every damned soul in hell, only the sinful souls are sent down here," the radio demon remarked, sitting down on the bench and positioning himself next to Izuku. "So, what kind of dark ritual did you perform to get here?" he asked, thinking that our protagonist might be a voodoo practitioner like him, not losing his broad grin for a single moment in the process. What? And no, I didn't do anything like that," Izuku clarified, shaking his hands in protest. I just got crushed by our rubble, closed my eyes, and before I knew up, I ended up here," he explained stammeringly, lowering his hands and observing the ground as he said this. "And now, I don't know where I am or what this place is." Our protagonist stuttered with pure unsureness. "And to make matters even worse, I can't go anywhere," he revealed, fighting with his waterworks, not wanting them to work from the stress he experienced due to the presence of the person he had just met. "If only I had a place to stay," he noted with hopelessness in his voice as he buried his face into his palms once again, thinking that there was no solution for his problem. All the while Alastor just sat next to him in silence, listening to his explanation. Since he arrived in hell all those years ago, he had encountered countless amounts of damned, sinful souls, each of them having their own respective look, reflecting the lives they lived and the way their mortal life ended. And when he encountered these sinners, if they didn't run away from him, he usually did 2 things to them: killed them if they did something to the ones of the fairer means he despised with all of his heart, or convinced them to make a deal with him. This was the action he originally planned to do with Izuku. But after he saw how he looked, which he was taken aback by but didn't show to him, and what situation he was in, he changed his mind. Of course, he didn't do this because he felt pity for our protagonist. He did not feel like that at all. The only reason why he decided not to establish a soul deal with him was because it wouldn't have been that entertaining for him to watch Izuku fall from this down in the dumpster. He needed to give our protagonist hope to make him feel like he was safe and he could trust him. And after he made him feel safe, he would wait patiently until the perfect time would come for him to make the deal with Izuku. And to that purpose, he could use the hotel he joined just a few days ago. He thought that after his 7-year absence, nothing could put at least a little bit of entertainment into his afterlife. But with the hotel, and now with this human-looking gentleman, this could change once and for all. So, after making his decision, he opened his mouth full of sharp, yellow-colored teeth and proceeded to speak. "I see," 𝐴𝐼 noted, then stood up from his seat and proceeded to take a few steps away from the bench. "Walk with me, my dear friend," he requested. Surprising Izuku with the sentence, he said. "Huh?" Izuku queried in confusion, looking up from his hands and setting his eyes upon the radio demon. "Do not fret, my dear friend. I won't do a single thing to you," the cannibalistic serial assured, turning around and looking back at our protagonist, stopping in his tracks. "I just wish for a nice, friendly walk. That's all I ask from you," he stated, gentleman, giving off the vibe of someone who truly wished to help our protagonist. Izuku was taken aback by this. This charismatic, kind person, who he didn't know for more than 5 minutes, wanted to take a friendly walk with him, not giving off any threatening signals to him at all, showing him that he could put his trust in him. Of course, this whole situation was strange for him, but he didn't have any other choice. So, after deciding the action he was going to take, Izuku rose from the bench he was sitting on and walked up to the radio-loving overlord, joining his company. "You chose well," 𝐴𝐼 remarked, then attempted to continue his walking again. "Now, my dear friend, I know a place that would be just the right solution for your issue. In the meantime, allow me to fill you in about this world and tell you everything you need to know," he said as placed his cane back into his right hand and walked in the direction of the exit of the park. All the while Izuku accompanied him in this journey, listening to what he told him. Little did our protagonist know, the special place 𝐴𝐼 was about to take him would change his afterlife forever. Or rather, a special someone. Hell, the realm of suffering. The place where the awful and evil people end up after their life on earth reaches its end. Most of the mortals think that hell is a place of torture where the bad souls get the price for their sinful action. But in reality, it was nothing like that. In hell, the sinners were allowed to continue the harmful, illegal activities they were doing in their human lives. The list of these sinful actions was almost infinite. Drug trafficking, killing, torturing, gang battles, sexual work, both online and on the street, sexual assault, abuse, manipulation, weapon selling, robbing, gambling, and the list goes on. And to top it off, they didn't have any kind of restriction regarding these acts. They were allowed to do these actions freely 24/7, thus making every single day in the realm of suffering complete chaos, where no one cared if you got stabbed, got hit by a car, or got robbed by someone. On that very day, every single sinner was doing their respective activities that were probably one, if not multiple of those harmful actions listed before, most of the damned souls even enjoying the acts they were doing. A certain green-haired, recently passed away 20-year-old person was not any different from the sinners of the fiery pits of hell, although the activity he was doing was far from being harmful and illegal. At that moment, Izuku Midoriya was findable on one of the many streets of the capital city of hell, having left the park a few minutes ago and walking on one of the sidewalks next to the road, with a car passing by him from time to time. And he was not alone. At his left, 𝐴𝐼, the radio demon, the powerful overlord who overthrew most of the overlord when he arrived in hell, was located, and walking alongside our protagonist at a normal pace, not wishing to leave the young man who found in the park minutes alone on the streets of Pentagram City. As they went on with the journey they were attending to, passing by countless amounts of sinners, each of them having unique appearances and most of them disappearing from view in pure fear after noticing the presence of the radio demon, and numerous amounts of bars, casinos, nightclubs, and strip clubs, with some of them having broken windows or being set on fire, our protagonist opened his mouth and began to speak, desiring to respond to the fact 𝐴𝐼 had just told him. "Wait," Izuku started, having pure, complete shock on his face. "So, this is hell? Like, actual hell?" He quizzed with pure confusion and shock in his voice. "Indeed, my dear friend. You're quite quick to catch on," 𝐴𝐼 declared, never losing one bit from the size of his well-known grin. "And I assure you, this skill of yours will come quite handy for you for the rest of your afterlife," the radio-loving overlord added as both he and Izuku continued their journey. "So, like, forever?" our protagonist inquired, witnessing the cannibalistic serial killer with his eyes in the process. "Exactly," the radio demon answered delightfully, confirming Izuku's thought about how much time he was going to spend in the realm of suffering. He moved his vision away from him and observed the street they were on in shock, trying to process all the things the radio-loving overlord had told him. Of course, he was shocked to find out that hell was a real place, thus making all the biblical stories and the existence of heaven real as well. But truth be told, he didn't mind getting into the fiery pits of hell. He thought a scum, quirkless brat like him deserved to end up in hell for the numerous awful things he committed against his will. Yes, his father was the one who forced him to shoot, kill, and torture people who were not loyal to him, but he was the one who pulled the trigger and tortured those people and didn't stand up against his father's evil wishes, thus making him a culprit in those crimes as well and causing him to earn a ticket into the realm of suffering, where he thought he deserved to be tortured for his crimes. As he reminded himself of all the awful actions he forcefully committed, he turned his head and focused his attention back on the demon next to him, moving his jaw muscles and unlocking his mouth, continuing his conversation with the cannibalistic serial killer. And where are we going exactly? Our protagonist wondered from the radio demon, shaking a bit in the process by the fact that he still didn't process the mere fact that he died and was in hell. As I mentioned to you moments ago, I will take you to a place where you can shelter yourself as long as you wish, 𝐴𝐿 said as he and Izuku turned to the right at the corner of a street, entering a new street and continuing their journey through it. And I assure you, my dear friend, you won't regret it, he said, then continued. The place I'm taking you is one of the most exquisite places in all of hell, the cannibalistic serial killer declared. In fact, I'm the co-owner and the facility manager of the place, he announced, resulting in our protagonist acquiring surprise inside him. Wait, really? Izuku quizzed, taken aback by the statement of the radio demon. Indeed, the radio demon replied, then went on with his speech. I have come to that place a few days ago to watch and enjoy as the wasteful souls struggle to accomplish something meaningful and fail spectacularly, he declared as he pictured the image of many sinners failing miserably, causing him to laugh after he thought this, with his laughter being followed by the laughing of an imaginary crowd that sounded like it was coming from an old-fashioned radio. Taking our protagonist a bit back with this, everyone has to find and embrace enjoyment in their afterlife, am I right? The cannibalistic serial killer queried from our protagonist, turning his head into his direction. Why yes, you're right, Mr. 𝐴𝐿. Izuku responded with a small, awkward smile, finding the type of joy the radio-loving overlord enjoyed strange and not sharing the same style of enjoyment with him one bit. Oh, my dear friend, there is no need for such formality. Just call me 𝐴𝐿, the radio-loving overlord noted, wishing to be referred by his name. Oh okay, sorry. Our protagonist apologized with the same awkward smile from before, scratching the back of his head with his right hand in shyness. Then, Izuku lowered his right hand, lost his awkward smile, and adopted forlornness on his face, witnessing the sidewalk in the process. But why? Why would you do this? He wondered, returning to his depressed, saddened, why would you help a scum like me? Our protagonist queried, looking down on himself for the crimes he forcefully performed. Why wouldn't I? It is my duty to assist those who are in need of my service, 𝐴𝐿 remarked cheerily, never losing his large grin full of yellow-colored teeth, resulting in our protagonist focusing his attention on him once again. After all, what are friends for? He asked smilingly, surprising Izuku with this statement of his. This man, this demon, who he hadn't known for less than 10 minutes, not only wanted to help him get used to his eternal afterlife in hell, but he also let him have a place to stay by and even called him a friend despite knowing just a tiny bit of information about him. Of course, his sudden act of kindness towards a stranger like him and his enjoyment in watching others fail in front of his eyes was kind of strange and a bit alarming for him. He didn't care about it. Because, at that moment, in the long run, for the very first time, things finally started to look good for Izuku, causing him to begin to form his trust in the radio-loving overlord and morph into a small, honest smile on his face, showing it off to the radio demon, who witnessed our protagonist with his own iconic grin, knowing that the seeds of trust were planted and began to grow inside our protagonist, thus allowing 𝐴𝐿 to get one step closer in making a deal with him. After this little chat between Izuku and the cannibalistic serial killer came to an end, they turned left at the corner of the street, entering yet another street of pentagram that the same types of buildings they encountered on their journey and obtained many damned souls, each of them minding their own respective businesses, such as killing each other and setting themselves or each other on fire. But as they performed this act, in the distance, a certain building caught the attention of the radio demon, causing him to open his mouth full of sharp, yellow-colored teeth and begin to speak. And there it is, our destination, 𝐴𝐿 announced cheerfully as he stopped in his tracks, lifting his right hand into the air, pointing at the direction in front of them with his vintage microphone. Seeing this, Izuku shifted his attention from the radio demon and looked in the direction he was pointing at with his old-fashioned mic, being curious about what he was pointing at. And when he did this action, he was quite taken aback by what he saw. In the distance, at the edge of the city, on the top of a tall hill that had a large, red-colored pentagram near the top, a very large and tall building was placed, being positioned over a cliff and having a red color palette. Just like the rest of the building, our protagonist and the radio demon passed by. But at the same time, it had a design that really got the attention of Izuku, mostly because of how unique it looked for him even from the distance that was between him, the radio-loving overlord, and the building. Heck, thanks to the shining neon lights on giant red letters of the sign at the top of the building, he could even read the name of the place from that distance, which was none other than 𝐻𝐻𝐵 Hotel. After Izuku set his eyes upon the building, which he now knew was a hotel, the cannibalistic serial killer lowered his right arm and moved his legs, continuing his journey towards the building with his well-known smile on his face, with our protagonist getting out of his phased-out state and catching up with him, not wishing to get lost in the chaos-filled streets of the city. A few more minutes passed, and they reached the metal gates of the territory of the place, passing through it and walking up to the top of the hill in no time, thus arriving right in front of the hotel, allowing our protagonist to observe it in all of its glory, making him find the exterior of the place even more interesting. The hotel was an elaborate amalgamation of arched windows and turrets, one of which, as Izuku witnessed it, seemed to be broken. It appeared to be at least 7 stories, with at least 5 of which possibly being guest floors. From our protagonist's perspective, on the right side of the building, the remnants of an ocean liner and a sailing ship were findable, while on the other side of the hotel, the remnants of a carousel litter were placed, with all of these structures seeming to be incorporated into the structure of the hotel itself. There was also a train with some tracks looping the first and second floor exterior, while at the top right side of the building, a small radio broadcasting tower was located, possibly used for the single purpose that its name signaled to our protagonist. Aside from the sign that had the hotel's name on it at the top of the place, there were many other signs displayed outside the building, with one being placed atop the entrance and taking the role of being a logo for the hotel, a neon hotel sign underneath the broadcasting tower, with the tower also having a small on-air sign on the top. The last signs on the outer facade of the place consisted of various red-colored arrows, some of them pointing at the entrance of the building, while others pointing at the broadcasting tower with their pointy ends. After Izuku observed the hotel with his own very eyes, amazed by how it looked, he and Alastor approached the entrance of the building, which had a tented cover with a booth in the center, with it being reminiscent of a circus or a theater ticket booth, and the radio demon raised his left hand once he and our protagonist got to one of the red-colored, yellow and stained glass double doors the booth had, grabbing its handle and pushing the door inside, allowing Izuku to enter the hotel first, which our protagonist was really grateful for. Once Izuku stepped inside the building, the radio demon followed him in this act, closing the door behind his back and catching up with our protagonist, who laid his green-colored eyes on the lobby area of the hotel, observing it with pure awe. The lobby of the hotel was a bit shabby and was in a bit of poor condition, but it was compensated with the beautiful use of gold and red colors, giving off the vibe that the hotel was possessed by royalty to Izuku. The floor of the lobby was made out of dark red-colored wood, matching the color scheme of the hotel. The room also possessed numerous vases and jars, obtaining plants in them, and a second floor that had golden-colored handrails on the edge, having eye motifs on them as decoration and preventing any demon from falling off the second floor and hurting themselves. The second floor also had yellow, stained glass windows, while the floor itself was accessible by going up large stairs in the middle that possessed red staircases and white side, obtaining the entrances of 2 long hallways, possibly being filled with numerous guest rooms for future residents. Although our protagonist didn't notice it, there was a parlor area that was findable on the right side of the room and filled with lavish furniture, which consisted of 2 sofas and an armchair. A table between that furniture, a 1950s-styled, old-fashioned television located in front of the furniture, and a fancy fireplace with a large, white-colored symbol above it, with the hat acquiring a pair of canes with apples at the end as motives, forming an X shape on the hat, and a bar labeled as the caviar bar on the left side as well, with it using skeletons, snakes, and bones as general themes, along with card suits and candles, thus advertising as in taking the role of a casino, instead of the general, red-colored walls the lobby possessed. The area of the bar had glowing green wooden walls, with a jackpot sign on the left wall and a 𝐴𝐿𝑒𝑗euce neon sign on the right wall. Finally, in the last part of the caviar bar, the word concierge was shown, thus suggesting that the bar also functioned as a check-in counter, as Izuku witnessed the lobby of the hotel in astonishment, not noticing the surprised and shocked faces of 2 demons who were at the bar at all, with a third demon being present at the parlor area but not catching sight of our protagonist due to cleaning the sofa she was standing on. A person suddenly spoke up from the second floor, resulting in him getting out of this state of his. "Hi, owl," someone exclaimed from the second floor, causing everyone in the room to turn their heads in the direction the voice came from. All the while Izuku performed this action as well, allowing him and the others to set his eyes on the person who had just exclaimed. On the second floor, at the top of the stairs, a tall, slender, beautiful female demon was standing, appearing to be in her early 20s and having nearly a height of 2 meters, thus being just 5.9 inches taller than 𝐀𝐦. She had long, blonde, well-set hair with lighter blonde and pink highlights, which was tied into a twice-banded low ponytail, all the while her blonde bangs flipped to her left with a curl. She had nice, black-colored lips and rosy red cheeks. She possessed gorgeous eyes, acquiring red irises with light yellow sclere. She obtained thick black eyelashes and gray eyelids. Finally, at the end of her fingers, she acquired black fingernails, which were pointed as well. Her attire consisted of a small black bow tie and black suspenders, with an untucked white, long-sleeved dress shirt, which was placed under the fitted red tuxedo jacket that had dark red lapels she was wearing. On her legs, she possessed a pair of red fitted pants, while on her feet, she was wearing black and white saddle shoes, covering her red hooves with them, which of course, our protagonist didn't have knowledge of. And she was not alone. At her right side, a small, female demonic cat and a tiny flying creature were findable, with the former obtaining black and white colored scruffy fur on her body, white spots on the tip of her ears and tail, with her ears sporting spots that formed a heart when the ears were close to one another, and her tail being very long, longer than her body length, a singular eye with a red iris and yellow sclere, and a red collar around her neck, having a golden medallion hanging down from it, and the latter acquiring reddish-pinkish fur, a pair of curved, long black horns, yellow eyes with red irises and reptilian-like thin vertical pupils, pink spots on his cheeks, freckles beside his eyes, dragon-like wings, hands that resembled hooves, a long, black tail with an end that was similar to the head of an arrow, a red bow tie and a black suit with a dress shirt under it. On her left side, a being very similar to the flying creature at her right was findable, even having the same clothes as him, but obtaining key differences such as a more scarlet-colored fur, normal pupils instead of a reptilian one, and a snake-like tongue instead of a normal one. As 𝐀𝐦 witnessed her and the creatures around her with his eyes, the female demon began to come down the stairs at a casual pace, with the hellish cat accompanying her in this act, opening her mouth and beginning to speak. "Are you back already? I thought you went for a walk and would only come back after around an hour," the demonic woman stated as she and the cat went down the stairs, with the two winged beings leaving her side and flying off to the right side of the lobby, doing something else, got to the ground floor, and walked up to the cannibalistic serial killer, reminding the radio demon to his most previous announcement to her and not noticing the presence of our protagonist due to focusing all her attention on the radio-loving overlord. "Yes, my dear, that was indeed what I said to you," 𝐴𝐿 said, agreeing with the female demon's statement. "And that was the exact thing I was about to do," he stated, then went on with his speech. "However, as I took my usual stroll through the park, I encountered this fine gentleman who might get good use of our assistance," he noted with his iconic grin, referring to our protagonist with this remark of his, pointing his vintage microphone at him and setting his eyes on him, with 𝐀𝐦 sharing this action with as well. "Really?" The hellish woman beamed with a big, joyful smile and starry eyes, immediately grabbing both hands of 𝐀𝐦 with her own hands and moving them up the height of her chest in excitement. "You want to be redeemed? I can tell you, you won't regret it," she remarked cheerfully. "Well, 𝐀𝐦 stuttered as a blush manifested on his cheeks, not being able to continue his sentence due to the surprise and the embarrassment he experienced from the sudden act of the female demon. "Hold on, my dear, let's give my dear friend some space," the radio demon remarked, then continued, "We don't want to scare him, do we?" He noted. "Oops, sorry," the demonic woman apologized, releasing her grip on the hands of our protagonist. "I always get excited when someone new comes to the hotel," she remarked smilingly, scratching the back of her head with her right hand in shyness. "It's not a pee problem," 𝐀𝐦 replied, still obtaining a tiny bit of blush on his face. "Now, with this out of the way, allow me to introduce you to one another," the cannibalistic serial killer said, then shifted his attention from the hellish woman and focused it on our protagonist. "My dear, this is 𝐀𝐦 Midoriya," he announced, pointing at 𝐀𝐦 with his old-fashioned mic. "He has just arrived in hell recently and had nowhere to go, so I offered to stay at this little investment of ours if he desired to," he explained. It's nice to meet you," our protagonist said politely, lifting his right hand up and waving with it a little bit, showing gratitude for meeting the female demon. "And, my dear friend, this is Charlie Morningstar," the radio-loving overlord announced, putting his vintage microphone into his left hand and placing his right arm on 𝐀𝐦's shoulders, pointing at the female demon with his microphone, referring to her as Charlie Morningstar, daughter of Lucifer, the princess of hell, and the heir to the throne of the hell, he declared, revealing the very important title Charlie possessed. "It's so nice to meet you, 𝐀𝐦," Charlie said with pure kindness, having the same big, happy smile on her face from before. "Welcome to the Has-Been Hotel. I hope you will enjoy your stay here if you want to stay, of course." Wait, princess. Izuku quizzed in shock, taken aback by meeting actual royalty, and now understanding why the hotel had so much usage of the color gold. It's an honor to meet you, your Highness. He stuttered anxiously as he performed a 90-degree bow, showing his deepest respect and honor to meet a royal demon, taking back everyone, with the exception of the cleaning demon at the parlor area, with this sudden action of his. Why, you don't need to be formal, Izuku, the Princess of Hell stated as her smile became a bit smaller, not being very fond of when someone addressed her with a formal style like this due to not liking to use the power that came with her title. Just call me Charlie, she requested, wishing to be called by her last name. Oh, okay, sorry. Our protagonist apologized as he rose from his bow, fearing that he might have upset the princess by calling her like that. You don't have to apologize, Izuku, Charlie responded, assuring Izuku that he hadn't done anything wrong by being formal. Come on, let me show you around, she declared, changing her cheerful grin to its original size. Then, she touched the right hand of our protagonist with her left hand and pulled him towards the caviar bar, desiring to introduce him to the place all by herself, surprising Izuku with this act, who just went with the flow and didn't even resist to get out of the grip of the Princess of Hell, observing her with his green eyes in the process. This delightful, joyful demon, who was the Princess of Hell and he didn't know for more than just a few minutes, showed absolute kindness to him and was very eager to let him stay at her hotel despite knowing him for such a short amount of time. And to top it off, the kindness she possessed was not sudden and strange like in the case of 𝐴𝐵. It seemed genuine. She was truly a nice person, possibly being one of the kindest beings in all of hell and one of the nicest persons our protagonist had ever met, with the kindest individual being his mother, of course. But as he thought this and witnessed her in her cheerful state, his vision got the attention of something about her that he had never expected. Her smile. There was something strange about her smile. Of course, it was full of joy and happiness, but that was not the thing Izuku found off about her smile. Behind all that pure delight, it seemed to our protagonist that her smile was false, forced even. He didn't understand it. Why would such a pretty, kind person like her force such a big smile that beamed nothing but cheerfulness and compassion on her face? Of course, he could have asked the reason behind her forcefully made grin, but he didn't want to seem rude by asking her for an activity she made that possibly had a personal reason behind it. So, after he made his decision not to inquire about the reason behind her forced smile due to not wishing to be impolite on the day of his arrival, he decided to act like he hadn't noticed anything about her grin, but not forgetting its existence at all. As Izuku thought about this, he and Charlie arrived at the bar part of the lobby, with the latter not releasing her grip on our protagonist's hand in the process. This is the bar area, where you can rest and have a drink after a hard day, Princess Charlotte announced, showing the caviar bar off to Izuku, and this is our bartender, Husk. Just ask him for a drink and he will make you one in no time, she declared, letting our protagonist's right hand go and moving next to the bar counter and pointing at the center behind the bar counter with her index fingers, observing the demon with her eyes, with Izuku setting his eyes upon the center as well. The demon appeared to acquire an anthropomorphic animal look, an anthropomorphic cat to be exact. The sclera of his were black, with light yellow irises and slit pupils. He acquired large and lengthy, red-colored feather-like eyebrows, possessing black vertical stripes near the tips and a small black heart above each eyebrow. He had dark top-colored fur on his body, overlaid with white on his face, torso, feet, and upper arms. The insides of his ears were white with a red tip at the point and a red heart in the center, with a black tuft of fluff protruding from each, thus creating the appearance of small hearts. Speaking of his fur, he obtained a darker shade of it encircling his ankles, mimicking cuffs on a set of pants, which of course, Izuku didn't see due to the sinner standing behind the counter of the bar. The damned soul also had a long and dark top-colored tail, which ended with a large spray of plume-like feathers that were vivid red with black and white stripes, matching his appearance. He also acquired heart-shaped, light yellow paw pads underneath the paws on his hands and feet, with the latter not being able to be witnessed by Izuku. The anthropomorphic feline sinner also possessed large and red feathered wings with darker top on the undersides of his back as well, with the undersides of his wings being decorated with black-colored stripes that featured red and white roulette wheel dot marking. The outside of his wings were decorated with more black stripes, which were wrapped around the joints and ran around a row of white roulette wheel dots. As for the demon's attire, he possessed minimal clothing on his body, consisting of a black top hat with a red band and gold button-like decoration, a red bow tie around his neck, and a set of black trousers which were held by black suspenders over his shoulders. As he witnessed the anthropomorphic cat demon with his green eyes, who was holding a beer bottle in his right hand, the sinner proceeded to open his mouth, revealing his sharp teeth that had the same color as the radio demon's teeth and beginning to speak. "Sup," Husk greeted with a simple yet grumpy tone, then went on with his speech. "Gotta say, I encountered fucked up shit after shit in my afterlife, but I've never seen an actual goddamn human to get to hell. he remarked with genuine surprise inside him, referring to the fact that our protagonist kept his human appearance. A human? Charlie questioned with starry eyes, becoming extremely excited after she heard this sentence coming out of the anthropomorphic feline demon's mouth. Then, she moved up to Izuku and gently placed her white-colored, black-nailed hands on his cheeks, going on with her speech in the process. "I've never seen a human before. I didn't know they looked like this. How amazing." She beamed, softly squeezing the cheeks of our protagonist, resulting in him adopting a tiny blush on his cheeks from the embarrassment he felt. "So how the fuck did you end up here?" the alcohol-loving cat sinner inquired. "Did you fall through some portal or what?" he asked, raising his right hand and putting the open end of the bottle to his mouth, attempting to drink the alcoholic beverage inside it. "And no, I didn't go through any portals," our protagonist stated as he turned his head in the direction of the anthropomorphic cat demon and set his eyes upon him, with his little blush disappearing from sight and Charlie taking her hands off of his face in the process. "I got crushed by falling debris when I tried to save a little girl's life," he explained as thought back to Kokoro, hoping that despite his death, she was healthy and didn't suffer any harm, surprising everyone in the hotel, with the exception of the dusting demon at the parlor area, with his explanation. "Oh my god, that's awful," the princess of hell gasped, feeling bad after she heard the way Izuku perished. "But that's a good deed. Why are you in hell then?" she wondered, not understanding why our protagonist was not in heaven instead of the realm of suffering. "Well, I did things in life I'm very proud of," Izuku confessed as he crossed his arms in sadness, thinking back to all the crimes his father forced him to perform when he was alive. "Oh, trust me, Toots, you're not the only one here who fucked up some way," the other sinner at the bar noted as he leaned back to the poker table, causing every single demon at the caviar bar to look at him. The sinner was a spider-based damned soul who had a slender body build, possessed 4 arms, and was taller than everyone else inside the Has-Been Hotel, standing at a height of 8 feet. He possessed white fur on his body, and he obtained a mop of fluffy white hair that extended from both the front and back of his head, with splotches of light pink being findable across it. He also acquired a distinctive and focal light pink heart pattern on the back of his head. The demon had a large fluff of fur on his chest, giving the impression that he had the breast of a woman. The demon possessed light pink-colored eyelids, with the same color being equipped by his eyebrows, giving the effect of eyeshadow, all the while his eyelashes were dark and thick. His eyes obtained cerise pink irises, with his right eye acquiring a light yellow sclere, and his left eye possessing a dark sclere. Under each eye, he possessed 3 cerise pink dots, which seemed to be freckles, but were actually another set of smaller eyes, which of course, Izuku didn't know. The mouth of the sinner was full of sharp, pointed, white-colored teeth, with just only one tooth being different from the others due to being made out of gold. The damned soul was wearing a long light pink suit blazer with horizontal white stripes down the length of his upper body, covering the light pink outlined heart that encircled his chest perfectly, the bottom point of which extended past his waistband and down to his crotch area, a reddish-gray miniskirt, and long reddish-gray thigh-high-heeled boots. He also accessorized with a reddish-gray bow tie with a cerise pink center and black choker, while on his hands, he was wearing long gloves, with the ones on his upper arms possessing cerise pink coloration with white detailing at the cuffs, and the ones on his lower arms having a white color scheme. As our protagonist witnessed him with his eyes, the demon proceeded to continue his speech. "Aside from Dollface here, every one of us did something that made us fall to this fucking place," the sinner noted, referring to Charlie as Dollface, which was a nickname he gave to her. "So don't worry, Toots, you're not alone," he stated, adopting a smirk on his face. "Oh, thanks, Izuku stuttered, being both surprised and confused by the damned soul's behavior. "Angel dust, Toots," the gay porn star responded, introducing himself to Izuku. "And I have to say, it's so good to have you here," he said, catching our protagonist with this remark off guard. Really?" Izuku questioned with pure confusion. "Yeah, it's been so boring being alone at this tacky hotel," a spider-based male demon remarked as he moved his legs and approached our protagonist. "I hope we can get to know each other a bit more, closer if you know what I mean," he noted in a flirtatious tone, positioning his upper right arm on Izuku's left shoulder and performing a circling movement on our protagonist's chest with the index finger of his upper left hand. "Angel," Charlie shouted with anger, frustrated at the gay porn star for trying on with the person who would possibly become her newest and first real guest. "I'm sorry, but I don't swing that way," Izuku stated, refusing the gay porn star's offer. "Are you sure?" Angel wondered, then went on with his speech. "Because I can change your mind about that with just one night, baby," he said, continuing to form circles on Izuku's chest with his upper left index finger. "Yes, I'm sure," our protagonist answered, standing by his statement. "Sorry, Angel, but I don't wish to use your services. But I'm sure there will be someone else who will be eager to accept what you offer." he remarked nicely, grabbing the gay porn star's hand with his right hand gently and moving it away from his chest, surprising Charlie and Husk and absolutely shocking Angel with this action. All the while the radio demon and the one-eyed demonic cat observed the scene in silence. Then, Izuku released his grip on the spider-like sinner's hand and moved his head in the direction of Princess Charlotte. Continuing to speak after he did this, "Are there any other places you want to show me?" he asked, witnessing Charlie with his eyes. "Oh, yes, of course," the Princess of Hell replied, shaking off her surprise. "Come," she said as she regained the forced smile on her face, not wishing to reveal her true emotional state to her newest individual in her rehabilitation center and her friends, which of course, all the residents in the hotel knew about. Then, she grabbed Izuku's right hand with her left hand and pulled him towards the other side of the lobby. All the while Angel just observed them in silence, completely taken aback by the mere fact that someone refused his, the most famous gay porn star's, offer, and the anthropomorphic feline sinner morph smirked at Angel's reaction. "And this is the parlor area, where you can get comfy, and you and the others can get to know each other," Charlie announced as she let go of our protagonist's hand, showing off the parlor to him. "And this is our housekeeper, Nifty," she declared as she pointed at the cleaning female sinner, referring to her as Nifty, resulting in her stopping the activity she was doing and turning her head around, looking at Izuku, with him setting his eyes upon her as well. And when our protagonist performed this action, he was taken aback in an instant by how small the demon was. She seemed to be a cockroach-based damned soul, possessing black-colored arms and legs, with the former having short claws on the fingers and the latter being pointed. On her face, a singular eye was findable that acquired a light yellow iris, thick eyelashes, a hot pink sclere with a yellow gradient, and a black pupil that obtained a pie eye cut. Her hair was red-pink colored and was kept in a slightly messy bob cut with swirls on each side, and a single light yellow streak located at the top. The mouth of the female demon was full of sharp light pale yellow teeth, being equipped with black lips and small hot pink dots on each corner of her mouth. The set of clothes she wore consisted of a black neckerchief around her neck, and a 1950s-style red-pink maid dress under a white apron with 3 hot pink dripping splotches, resembling blood stains. As Izuku witnessed the female, cockroach-like demon got off the sofa and began to approach him, starting to talk to him in the process. "A new boy at the hotel," Nifty gasped in delight as she arrived in front of our protagonist, jumping up to him and landing on his chest. "I hope you're a bad one," she told our protagonist in a malicious tone as she grabbed his shirt with her tiny hands and pulled him a bit closer to her, observing him with her bloodshot eye that emitted nothing but craziness, freaking out Izuku with this. "I assure you she's not a threat at all," Charlie stated, attempting to assure her potential patient that he didn't have to be scared of the maid of her hotel. "And you already know our great facility manager, Alastor," she remarked as she set her eyes upon the radio demon, with Izuku performing the same action. All the while Nifty continued to witness him. "So, what do you think, Izuku?" Princess Charlotte wondered from Izuku as her grin became a bit smaller, feeling nervous about his opinion about her hotel, making Izuku move his head in her direction. All the while the maid of the rehabilitation center released her grip on our protagonist's chest and got off of his chest. "Well, I really like the look of the place. It's very fancy," Izuku noted with a small smile on his face, managing to calm down after his interaction with the female cockroach-like sinner, who just stood beside him and witnessed Izuku's conversation with the hotel's owner. "Thank you," the Princess of Hell remercied, feeling happy for the compliment, "but you should give most of the praise to Al. He's the one who prettied it up after all," she remarked, drawing the attention of the cannibalistic serial killer upon herself with this remark. "Oh, my dear, I'm flattered," Alastor noted joyfully, having his well-known broad smile on his face. "But may I ask a question?" our protagonist inquired. "Sure, go ahead," the Princess of Hell responded, allowing Izuku to ask his question. "You mentioned something about redemption. Is that what this hotel is about?" our protagonist queried, referring to the statement Charlie said when the radio-loving overlord introduced him to her. "Yeah, Charlie, we give sinners a second chance and try to redeem them before the annual extermination happens," she revealed, shocking Izuku with this statement of hers. What? Our protagonist quizzed in horror, becoming terrified by the revealing of such a horrific event. "Oh right, you don't know about the exterminations," Princess Charlotte remembered, reminding herself of the fact that Izuku had just arrived in hell. "Every year, heaven sends down an army of angels to exterminate sinners, my people," she explained, losing her forced smile a bit for a moment as she thought about the exterminations. "And I can't stand that. I can't just stay still while my people are slaughtered every year in front of my eyes," the Princess of Hell confessed, with her smile becoming more and more curved down as she continued her speech. "We have lost so many souls, and I can't bear that anymore," she noted, acquiring increasing melancholy inside her body. "That's why I started this hotel, to provide shelter for sinners and offer them a chance to become better and go to heaven, to prevent them from dying or losing a person they care about, she announced as she crossed her arms, losing the cover she obtained on herself at the moment this sentence left her mouth, revealing her true, depressed emotional state, making the residents of her hotel, with the exception of the radio-loving overlord, to morph a worried expression on their faces, with even the one-eyed and two flying beings sharing this act with the members of the main cast. No, 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 Izuku said in panic as held his head with his hands, bending his legs and kneeling down to the floor in the process. This can't be. Why does it have to be? She said as he experienced a mental breakdown in front of everybody, with tears even beginning to manifest in the corner of his eyes. He couldn't believe it. He thought that with his arrival to Hell and to the hotel of the Princess of Hell, he thought he could get away from all the bad behavior he experienced in his human life, which he thought he deserved for the crimes he committed. And things would finally get on the better, more shining side in his life, even if it was in his afterlife, not his mortal life. But no, he was not even worthy of that. Besides all the hazards and horrific events that could harm him in the fiery pits of hell, he has to bear the existence and the dangers of an annual actual genocide carried by the ones who are told to represent all the good and kindness in the universe. Of course, he didn't know that the yearly extermination was carried out by the exorcists. And the majority of heaven didn't even have knowledge of the exterminations. But even just the existence of such an event was too much for him to handle both emotionally and mentally. He just couldn't take it anymore. He had to let some steam off. And if it meant being brought down to his knees and tearing up in front of the Princess of Hell and the demonic residents of her hotel, he was eager to take that route. As Izuku proceeded to experience his mental breakdown in front of everybody, seeing how bad of a state he was in, Princess Charlotte started to feel bad for him, wishing to cheer him up. "Don't worry, Izuku, they can't hurt you here," Charlie assured as she crouched down to our protagonist and hid her sadness behind a small fake smile that she formed on her face, attempting to calm Izuku down and making him raise his vision from the floor and set his eyes upon her. "Everyone here in the Has-Been Hotel is under my protection," she declared, observing our protagonist with her eyes. "And if you decide to stay here, this would include you too, Izuku," Princess Charlotte stated. Then continued her speech. "Of course, I understand if you don't give this place a chance. You wouldn't be the first one who would do that," she commented as she lost her fake smile a bit, remembering back all the sinners who didn't believe in her dream and treated her as a laughing stock. "I just want to let you know that even if you don't want to stay at the hotel, we'll wait for you to come back with open arms," the Princess of Hell said. Then gently grabbed both of Izuku's hands and began to rise up from her crouch, helping our protagonist to his feet. "So, what do you say, Izuku?" she questioned our protagonist, who just stood in front of her, witnessing her in complete silence. It just seemed almost unreal to him. Charlie, the Princess of Hell and future Queen of Hell, not only offered him a chance to live at her hotel but even wished to protect him from the annual extermination and help him get to heaven, thus saving him from being killed during the yearly cleanse. And because of this, despite knowing her for a short amount of time, Charlie earned our protagonist's deepest gratitude and respect, making him. But there was one problem. He didn't want to be redeemed, not because he didn't believe in it, but because he thought deserved it for all the horrible actions his father forced him to commit. He thought he would rather have deserved a second death than a second scene. But he still wanted to repay Charlie for giving him shelter at her rehabilitation center, so he had to find an alternative way to do that. And as he was thinking about this, an idea popped up in his head. An idea that if he performed, it would both benefit the hotel, thus aiding Princess Charlotte, and wouldn't render him the useless brat his father labeled him. So, after making his decision, he gulped a bit of saliva down on his throat and unlocked his mouth, beginning to speak. I want to stay here," Izuku replied as he wiped his forming tears away with his hands, stuttering a bit due to having not processed the reveal of the exterminations yet and announcing his choice of action to Princess Charlotte. "Really?" Charlie beamed, acquiring excitement and joy after Izuku's decision. "Why, yes," our protagonist confirmed. "Yes, thank you, Izuku," Princess Charlotte thanked with pure gratitude. "Come, I will show you your room and we will set you on the proper path to redemption in no time," she declared, then laid her right hand on Izuku's left hand and started to pull him towards one of the hallways, wishing to take him to the room where he would spend the rest of his stay at her place of healing. "But I want to contribute to the hotel in some way," Izuku declared, resulting in Charlie interrupting her movement and stopping in her tracks. "What?" Charlie quizzed in surprise, causing her to move her head around and focus her attention on him once again. I mean, I just can't just stay here and do nothing after you let me reside here," Izuku remarked, then went on with his speech. I want to pay you back for allowing me to live here," he added as he freed his hand from Charlie's grip. "So if you allow me, may I work here?" our protagonist inquired, catching the Princess of Hell off guard with this question of his. "You want to work here?" the Princess of Hell asked, being a bit confused and taken aback by our protagonist's request. Why yes, Izuku answered, hoping that Charlie didn't find his request strange. After hearing the action he desired to do, Princess Charlotte placed her right thumb and right index finger under her chin, grabbing it and beginning to think of a job that would suit Izuku. I guess I can give you a job here, the Princess of Hell said. Then the idea of an ideal job for our protagonist. Oh, you could be the doorman of the hotel, she suggested, then went on with her speech. Of course, you wouldn't do anything difficult like filling documents or helping Nifty or Husk with their work to get used to your new conditions. Charlie explained. Will this be okay for you, Izuku? She wondered, hoping that Izuku would accept this job offer. Why yes, it's perfect, Izuku responded, accepting Princess Charlotte's offer. Great, Princess Charlotte answered, then continued, wait here. I'm going to get you clean clothes you could wear during your stay, she announced as she was about upstairs to her room to search for attire for our protagonist, referring to the fact that the only clothes he possessed were the ones he was wearing at that moment. There's no need for that, my dear, 𝐴𝐿 stated as he walked up to the duo, causing Charlie to interrupt the activity she was about to do. Allow me to handle this, he said, then raised his left hand and touched his left thumb and left middle finger together, performing a simple snap with them. The moment the cannibalistic serial killer snapped with his fingers, suddenly, a bunch of clothes manifested in Izuku's hands, making him turn his head and set his eyes upon the clothes in pure surprise. The clothes were well folded, being placed atop each other. The clothes appeared to be fancy, elegant ones, and the whole attire seemed to be a doorman outfit, consisting of an untucked white, long-sleeved dress shirt, a fitted green tuxedo jacket with black-colored buttons, and a bit of black coloration at the end of both sleeves, separating it from the green parts of the jacket with a thin, white-colored, triangle-shaped line, and a pair of black-fitted jeans. Under these clothes, a light green pajama shirt and light green pajama pants, thus allowing him to wear something on his body during his sleep. As the last part of the two attires, on the top of the pile of clothes, a pair of black elegant shoes, green-colored socks, and a pair of green indoor slippers were findable, with the former letting Izuku wear something on his feet when he would move around inside the hotel, and with the latter allowing him to move around the hotel during the late hours of the day if he woke up from his slumber. Finally, as the last part of his doorman attire, there was also a doorman hat next to the shoes, having a green-colored crown, a white band, and a black-colored bill, with the crown area possessing the upper half of the black key symbol that the logo at the entrance of the hotel obtained in the middle front area. After witnessing the pile of clothes in his hands, our protagonist turned his head in the direction of the cannibalistic serial killer and unlocked his mouth, starting to speak. Thank you, 𝐴𝐿, Izuku remercied, being grateful for the radio demon's gesture. You're welcome, my dear friend, the radio-loving overlord responded with his iconic wide grin, knowing that he once again got one step closer to earning the full trust of our protagonist. Now, follow me, Izuku, Charlie declared, then turned around and continued her journey towards the nearest hallway, with our protagonist accompanying her on this journey and both of them entering the hallway once they reached its entrance. All the while the rest of the main cast just observed their leave in silence. The hallway obtained the same color palette as the rest of the hotel, acquiring red-colored walls that had symbols representing various circus animals, such as lions and elephants, which Izuku found quite interesting, thinking that it matched the theme of the hotel pretty well. There were countless amounts of dark red wooden doors in the hallway, each of them having a different, golden-colored number on their surface and leading inside a guest room where the future residents could reside, while fancy lamps were put between those doors, lighting up the hallway with the light they emitted with the help of electricity. As our protagonist witnessed the hallway and its beauty, the Princess of Hell stopped in her tracks, resulting in him interrupting his movement and focusing her attention on her, wishing to know the reason behind her stopping. And when he did this, he saw that they were in front of one of the dark red-colored wooden doors, acquiring the number 15 on its surface, thus showing the name of the room. This will be your room, Princess Charlotte announced, grabbing the handle of the door with her right hand and moving it downwards, thus opening the door for the newest residents of her place of healing and presenting the inner look of the room to him. At first, both he and Charlie didn't see a single thing due to the complete darkness that occupied the room. But shortly after seeing the dark room, the Princess of Hell walked inside the guest room and touched the switch that was placed at the right side of the door with her right hand, turning the lights on and offering both her and our protagonist a chance to have a better view of the interior of the room. Then, Charlie moved aside, letting Izuku step inside and observe the look of the room with his own two eyes. The room had a medium size and a general design, possessing the same color scheme as the rest of the building. In the room, a double bed was findable, being placed on the right side of the room and being positioned horizontally to the wall at the end of the room. On the left side of the bed, which was closer to Izuku at that moment, a small cabinet was placed, acquiring a fancy lamp on its top, while on the other side of the bed, at the wall that was at the end of the guest room, a wooden double-doored wardrobe was positioned, allowing our protagonist to store his current and newly obtained clothes inside it. On the other side of the cabinet, a desk and a wooden chair were findable, with the desk possessing a pencil container with lots of pencils in it and a desk lamp on it, letting Izuku do his job even if it was late. At the left side of the room, another door was placed, possibly leading to the bathroom of the guest room where our protagonist could clean himself. Finally, at that side of the guest room, at the wall, in front of the bed, a TV cabinet was positioned with a flat-screen television device on it, allowing Izuku to comfortably watch the TV if he desired to. You can put your clothes into the wardrobe, or on the bed, wherever you want, Charlie remarked as Izuku looked around the room. You went through a lot today. You can take the rest of the day out, she noted. Take a nap if you want so you can be well rested when you start your first day at the hotel tomorrow. Okay, Princess Charlotte suggested, wanting her newest employee to be as fit and rested the following day as possible. Oh, okay, Izuku answered, understanding what the Princess of Hell told him. Awesome, Charlie responded, then continued, if you need anything, just ask me or I'll ask her for help, she stated, letting our protagonist know that he could ask for help if he needed it. Then, the Princess of Hell turned around and walked back to the entrance of the room, moving her right hand and laying it on the handle of the front door of the guest room. Once she completed this act, she began to step outside the room, pulling the door after her, thus getting closer and closer to closing it. But before she could do that, she turned around and set her eyes on Izuku one last time, opening her mouth and starting to talk once again. Have a nice rest, Izuku, the Princess of Hell told Izuku as she looked at him with her forced smile through the small gap, wishing him to rest well. Thank you, Charlie. Rest well, you too, our protagonist replied, saying farewell to his newest boss. With this, Charlie moved the door and closed it fully, disappearing from sight and leaving Izuku in his new room all to himself. After she closed the door, Princess Charlotte moved her body around and lost her fake, forced grin on her face, leaning to the door with her back and releasing a tired sigh from her mouth. So much stuff happened to her during these last few days. First, she had that interview with Katie Killjoy that didn't end very well. Then Alastor came to the hotel and offered his help all because he wanted to watch the hotel fail miserably with joy. And now, this person, who had the appearance of a human and seemed to be around her age physically, came to her hotel and wanted to work for her due to her letting him stay as long as he wanted. And despite the true intentions of the radio demon, with his help and with her newest guest at her hotel, who genuinely seemed to be a nice person, it appeared to her that despite the hardships she had faced, there was a finally chance to accomplish her true dream, causing her to obtain a bit of hope and form a tiny, yet true smile on her face. Then, Charlie straightened her posture, turned to the left, and set off in the direction of the lobby, wishing to join the others there. Meanwhile, once Princess Charlotte left the room, our protagonist put his newly got clothes on his bed, took off his shoes, and headed inside the bathroom, taking his clothes off and cleaning himself with a quick shower. After he was done with this and dried himself with the towel that was already there when he entered the room, which he wrapped around his waist, he left the bathroom and put the pajamas he received from Alastor, putting his clothes and shoes into the wardrobe, activating the small lamp on the cabinet, and turning off the main lights in the room. Then, he got into the bed and covered himself with the red-colored blanket, preparing for the first ever sleep in his afterlife. But before he could accomplish that, he reminded himself of all the things that happened that day. His death, his meeting with Alastor, coming to the hotel, meeting Charlie, everything. How crazy it was that he was in actual hell and he was now living in the hotel of the Princess of Hell. And with this, he turned the lamp off and closed his eyes, slowly venturing into the realm of dreams while hoping that despite hell's dangers and the threat of the annual extermination, his life, or rather afterlife, would be normal and would go back on track, getting rid of all the hatred he received from the public when he was alive.